This is Peter,
And this is Tom.
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to the podcast. Tommy, what do we got?
Well, today we are going to look into some of the unsolved crimes in American history. There's thousands of them. So we're
So
just
many.
So what Peter and I did, we picked two major ones, and then each one of us have I guess a mystery one or a surprise one that Peter doesn't know which one I chose, and he doesn't, and I don't know which one he chose. And we'll just go around, talk about it, and see where the conversation leads.
Yep. And obviously, we can't go over every cold case in American history, but
No, and that's not the purpose of this podcast. There's enough of
no,
those
yeah,
podcasts
this is like a
out there.
survey thing. We're just talking.
And by the way, Law and
How-
Order season 22 starts today. Law and Order SVU season 22.
Look at that.
All right, Stabler's
Totally
coming
fitting.
back this year. It's a big deal.
Totally fitting.
You have no idea what I'm talking about, Peter, but it's okay.
Me? No idea. No, but I mean, I assume it's totally fitting. I mean, I've probably seen some here and there, but again, not a big fan. I watch the old stuff. I watch the 1940s film noir and westerns. That's my jam.
That's the stuff that my dad watches. Good job.
I know, right? So, I think we should start with the two that we picked. By the way, that we decided to talk about. One was the Black Dahlia murder from 1940s. And the other one was D.B. Cooper. Actually, D.B. Cooper, I'm going to give a little shout out to one of my students, Dan, who said, Mr. Zblocki, I listened to your podcast and you should definitely do something on D.B. Cooper. So here it is, right?
And this is something that I've done in my class when I used to teach law. And we would do like a thing on a unit on crimes. And we did a project on these unsolved crimes, unsolved mysteries. And the ones, D.B. Cooper and Black Dahlia were always the ones that students always picked to try to solve the case, look at the suspects, just make their own claim and things of that nature. And the students always got very interested. So it's obviously these true crime stories are very popular even today. Obviously,
Yes.
still today.
So let's start off with Black Dahlia, and then we'll
Black
go to D.B.
Dahlia.
Cooper. From there, we'll kind of see what you came up with and what I came up with. Right?
Sounds good.
The Dahlia murder.
What's that? Wasn't she called the most beautiful murder or something of that nature?
Yes. And actually, the reason why it's called the Black Dahlia was it was made up by the reporters of the time, and it was based off of a movie that was out at the time, around this time, and it was the Blue Dahlia, and the movie was about a man who comes back from somewhere and he finds his wife cheating on him, and then the wife is found dead, and no one really knows who killed the wife, and because that was not her name. So
Yes.
let's just kind of get into what happened here, right? Morning, January 15th, 1947. A woman's body is essentially found severed into two pieces.
Yeah. Well,
right?
at first it wasn't even a woman's body. Remember, the woman who found it was walking her dog.
Yes.
And she thought she found a discarded store mannequin. That's how dismembered this corpse was.
Yes.
And it was in Los Angeles. This is also important to understand. It's in Los Angeles, right outside of
Yep. Los
Hollywood.
Angeles.
Yeah.
January 1947. Like you said, this woman's walking her dog, and from far away, she's like, "What is that?" And then she gets closer, and she realizes that actually, again, not a mannequin, definitely a corpse. So she rushed to a nearby house, telephoned the police, but the corpse was severed into two pieces, right? That's important to note. And not only was it severed in two pieces at the waist, but it was also drained of all blood,
yeah.
right? Skin was super pale white, and besides the fact that this woman was cut in half, she was also cleaned.
Yeah,
that was one
washed.
thing.
Yeah.
She was washed with gasoline, they said, meticulously washed.
Well, it's going to destroy any evidence. Yeah.
Yep, and the face was slashed from corner of her mouth to her ears, kind of creating this effect of like a smile.
Yeah, the Glasgow smile is what it's called. If you guys did get kind of a mental picture of it, if you remember seeing The Dark Knight Returns movie, not The Dark Knight, but the Joker with Keith Ledger's Joker.
Yeah, that's The Dark Knight.
And how he had those scars on the sides of his mouth. That's what it looked like.
Yep. And again, we're getting a little graphic here, but lower body positioned a foot away from the upper body. They said the intestines were tucked away neatly underneath her, and the corpse was posed, right, with her hands over her head and elbows bent at right angles, and her legs were spread apart. So, with that in mind, it wasn't that long before they were able to identify her. Actually, identify this what became known as the Black Dahlia fairly quickly. But the woman's real name was Elizabeth Short.
Short.
Yep, and she was, I believe, about 23 years old at the
Yeah.
time. And
Young,
Elizabeth,
expiring actress. That's why she was there. She wanted to be
yes,
famous, and that was kind of what made a lot of this case so ironic, and why true crime writers and detectives were so interested in it. Was like, well, she did become famous after her death. She is considered famous now, but she's famous from being murdered, not for being a famous actress
yes.
or anything of that nature. Yeah.
And the reason they were able to find her, find out who she was, is because she was actually arrested in 1943, and she was arrested for underage drinking,
Hmm.
and she was not, so therefore she had a record, and they were able to identify her based on her finger prints. She was also kind of known as a very promiscuous young lady, often dating married men, running away from her house. She lived in like three various states prior to being murdered. And again, we're kind of simplifying this story because there is a lot to it.
Oh yeah, this
Uh,
this is like I said. They've been doing podcasts on this, movies,
yeah,
books. This is a lot. We're just kind of giving the basic overflow
overview.
here. Yeah,
Yeah,
overview.
yeah. The autopsies performed right shortly thereafter, actually within a day, I think. And it says that she was they were able to kind of figure out more or less what she looked like beforehand before they actually managed to get photos of her. But they said the body being cut completely in half was very specifically, meticulously done.
How to be someone
Um,
who had experience in doing something like that.
Absolutely. They said that they're moved by transcending the lumbar spine between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, severing the intestine. Everything was so perfectly done that there was actually very little bruising along the
Yeah.
incision line, and she was cut in half. So, again, definitely performed by a professional, no question about it.
I mean, professional, we mean someone like probably they believe it was a doctor or surgeon, something of that
Surgeon, yep,
nature. Yeah.
yep. And then they also were able to kind of figure out, determine the cause of death. They thought it was actually hemorrhaging, right? Because of the lacerations to her face and the
Well,
shock from different blows to head and face.
and if you get cut in half, that's going to kill you too.
Yeah,
Without, I'm just
right.
kidding. That without, I'm not trying to be
Of course.
funny, but
But
obviously she was
she
already
was dead
deceased at the
by the
time they cut her
time.
in half. Yeah.
Yes. So at that point, the investigation kind of begins, and we're trying to figure out, or they're trying to figure out. Again, it's 1947.
Yeah.
DNA is really not a thing.
No, no. And even if there
Um,
was, it would have been hard to get it because, like Pete, you said before, they cover the body. Whoever killed her washed the body with gasoline. So that's going to
yes,
destroy a lot of that stuff. It's going to contaminate the evidence. Really, what they would do now is probably get rid of fingerprints because they did have
absolutely,
fingerprints at the time. And there were a lot of
absolutely.
suspects. What I was reading, there was
A lot of suspects.
over
Yeah,
500 people actually confessed to being the Black Dahlia killer over the years. A lot of those people, more than half, weren't even born yet at the time of the murder. So
yeah,
you get this in a lot, like people just confess to it, and the police text like you can be surprised how many people say, "Oh, they call up and say my relative was the Black Dahlia killed murderer," and stuff like that. And a lot of them aren't taken seriously, but they do investigate a lot of these. But there were a lot of suspects just at the time.
yeah. And again, the reason why we're talking about it is because it is to this day a cold case.
Yeah,
It has never really been solved.
and it never can
Although,
be solved because I read that all the remains of the Black Dahlia were they're not around anymore. They were destroyed unintentionally. So
really, I didn't know that.
there's no remains of her. They don't have her remains or anything else, any tissue samples in that to test. So they can never, even if somehow they get some DNA or something pops up, they have nothing to test it against. So even a
I mean, you could see
confession,
pictures of it. You could Google it, pictures.
yeah,
They're,
but
they're
even but
kind of
they don't
gross.
have the actual
Yeah, DNA and
itself.
whatnot.
Yeah,
Initially, the initial investigation that begins shortly thereafter actually starts about a week or so afterwards, after the body is discovered. There is a suspicious manila envelope, right, that is
hmm.
discovered by U.S. Postal Service
Well,
worker.
they also got a phone call, right, saying that
They did get a phone call. The
I'm the
examiner got a phone call.
yeah I'm the murderer of the Black Dahlia, and you'll be hearing from me soon.
Yes, and that was a phone call made that was made to the Los Angeles
Yes,
Examiner.
yeah.
And then that couple days later, there is a suspicious manila envelope that is discovered by a postal worker. It is actually addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner, and the words inside are cut out and pasted from newspaper clippings. So again, very difficult to figure out who or what. But it did say, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow," and it did contain her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names, things of that nature. Address book, and the actual address book, there was kind of the beginning of the investigation because they started going through all the people that were in the address book. The one thing I want to mention that was kind of really messed up is how the reporters, some of the initial reporters, found out about the murder, like with the same day that it happened. Obviously, because this became news, everyone kind of went to the scene. But because they were able to identify her name fairly quickly because of her prior arrest record, so many reporters, or one in particular, actually called her mother in a
Hmm.
different state. Did you hear this?
I remember hearing that's how she found out about it, right?
Yeah, but the way he went about it was he actually told the mother that her daughter, Elizabeth, had just won a beauty pageant. And he started asking all kinds of questions about Elizabeth because he just wanted to get as much information out of the mother as possible to have the best story. And he went on for like 15 minutes. And then
Yeah, I did hear
after he
that.
had all the information he wanted, he's like, "Oh, by the way, your daughter's actually been found, murdered,
Not yeah,
um,
not just murder, but mutilated.
mutilated." And
Yeah,
that's I
yeah.
was just what a messed up.
Well, no, this isn't. I'm not defending it, but this isn't the 40s. They're just trying to get this
Yeah,
story.
that's
So they try to beat
nuts.
people out, getting any other information. They knew how hungry people were. The
To figure out, yeah,
sensationalism of the time, and it became like a craze. This story became such a just huge publicity and publicized because of the graphic nature of the crime and everything like that. And it just that's one reason why it just exploded. And there's been movies based on it. Even today. I mean, people no, it's a well. You mentioned the Black Dahlia. People at least think, "Oh, that sounds familiar. What was that again?" Like
yeah,
they're somewhat aware of it.
yeah. And after the examiner, the packet was found. So and after the phone call, so clearly there's somebody out there that is doing this, that is contacting the media. A handbag and one shoe, are found on top of a garbage can in an alley very close to where the body was found, and they were recovered by police, and they were also wiped clean with gasoline. Again, no fingerprints, but they were identified as Elizabeth Short's belongings. Did you read about the weird suicide note?
I did see something about a suicide note. Yeah,
Yeah, so then they found like clothes, nicely tucked
tucked away. Yeah,
clothes. Yeah, just kind of sitting on a beach. You had shoes and nicely, folded pants on top of it and a shirt. Just randomly sitting, at the ocean's edge. And there's a note inside the shoe that said, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I'm too much of a coward to turn myself in. So this is the best way out for me." The idea of like I'm gonna somebody jumped in
Nick.
the ocean, but nothing was ever discovered after that. No one really knew what was going on with regards to that. So what are some suspects here, Tom?
Well, yeah, there are a whole number of suspects. You have there's one suspect that by the name of he was actually a publisher in Times Magazine, Norman Chandler, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of authors claim that who had researched the case claim that he actually impregnated her, and that's why he killed her.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he doesn't really have the knowledge. The one person that always sticks out, and a lot of my students over the years picked as the Black Dahlia murderer, was a man by the name of George Hodel Jr. He was a suspect
Absolutely.
in her murder, and he actually was a physician or had some knowledge of that. A lot of the homicide detectives at the time believed that he also was the murderer. He was suspected of killing people before this and after this.
Yes.
Supposedly, they heard him say, he told them, like, well, even if I did kill you, you could never prove it. Like,
Yes.
it would be
And
impossible.
because he actually said he's like recorded and heard
Yeah,
saying,
saying,
because my secretary knew it, but I killed her too, or something like
yeah.
along
Well, his
those lines.
secretary, Ruth Spalding, actually, yeah, supposedly the rumors are like she somehow found some evidence or overheard him talking about killing the Black Dahlia, killing Elizabeth Short. So then he kills her. And then he says, yeah, and he's recorded and saying this, the only person that knew I killed her or could prove I could kill her was my secretary. And I took care of that. I took care of her. Like, well,
Yeah.
that's kind of weird. He was never charged or any of these. And he was not a good person. He was accused of, killing other before this. He was
He
accused
also
of
made a lot of
raping his
illegal.
own daughter. Like he was not
Yes, he
a.
was accused of raping his daughter, and then he
He
made
fled
a
the country
lot.
several times. Yeah, just to get away.
Yep, he had to escape the country. I'll say, yeah,
He
and
went
then
to
he
the
also
Philippines.
and he also made a lot of like back alley abortions, and they said that like he again very much people believe that this guy did it. I
Yeah,
mean, And even his son came out. His son became a detective
I believe that he did it.
years
Yeah,
later, and he came out and he goes, "Look, my father did this. Like, and this is, and again, if you look at the evidence, and he's been long gone, this guy, but if you look at the evidence, I mean,
he could
it
definitely
does
have
seem
done it. Could he? Like I said,
he was a surgeon. I mean,
he
that's
had
what he
that
did.
skill. Why is he saying, talking about, he was obsessed with the case? You don't joke that you killed your secretary because she could prove that you killed the Black Dahlia. That's just something, and especially if you're a suspect. It's
Yeah,
almost like he was trying to, and he did. Police said he was taunting them all the time too, because he's like, "There's no way you can prove it. You can't prove it." And they
yeah,
knew that there was no way they could bring this evidence. It would be really hard. It was all circumstantial evidence. Well, you killed her because you had the knowledge to do it, but you know how many other people have the knowledge to cut a corpse in half in L.A.
yeah,
Any surgeon there would have that type of knowledge, that type of skill. So you couldn't just say it was him. You have to. There was more evidence. I know he was seen with her. Also, there was some evidence that they had some sort of relationship prior. Because again,
yes.
she wanted to get famous, and not blaming her at all, but she wanted famous. She wanted money. He had money. He was not wealthy, but he was a doctor, so he had money at the time. He was put together. He knew he had connections.
If you look at the files, the police files, again, cold case, he is the prime suspect. They just
Yeah,
couldn't quite pin it on him.
so it remains
But yeah, so
unsolved.
remains unsolved, right? I guess this is our first unsolved case of tonight's podcast.
Yeah, so
Which,
go home, research it yourselves and make up your own conclusions. Because even though it might seem like George Hordell Jr. did it, there are bunch of other people. You have Jeff Connors, Mark Hansen, another
yes,
doctor, Francis E. Sweeney. You have Woody Guntry, Buddy Siegel. Some people are even saying the father, or George Odell Sr., was a killer.
yes,
So you have all of some of his friends. There's a guy by the name of Fred Sexton, right? Yeah, Fred Sexton. Yeah, he
yeah,
was one of Odell's friends. That he was the one that killed her because he was jealous of the relationship that he had with George, that she had with George. And then Lehman
yeah.
goes
A
on and
lot
on
of
and on.
people.
And these aren't even people that confessed. These were suspects that the cops were looking into.
Yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
there's credible evidence for each one. That's what makes it so crazy too. Yes, George Hordell Jr. kind of sticks out a lot, and you can kind of, yeah, he did it. But if you really research some of these others, you're like, they could have done it too. Like
Yeah.
it will never be solved, and that's very sad when you think about that. This Elizabeth Short, this poor woman, justice will really not be served for her in this world.
What is it with us and these gruesome things, man? So DB Cooper is definitely a lighter case.
Yeah, to an extent. I
All
mean,
right.
as far as like it's actually glorified a lot more. Like
All right, you
that's
want to
what's
kind of get
crazy.
us you want to get us
That's
started
what's
into
crazy
this
a
a little
lot
bit?
with DB Cooper. Well, the DB Cooper case is an interesting case. It's the only unsolved hijacking in American history. And what basically took place, some of you guys probably heard of this before, but there was a Boeing 727 aircraft was hijacked between Portland and Seattle on the afternoon of November 24th, 1971. And a man purchased an airline ticket, and the alias was Dan Cooper. That was not his real name. And
Yep.
there was actually a news miscommunication. And that's how the popular lore was as DB Cooper. That's kind of like the press made that up. That wasn't his name. It's not the name he gave to the
And there actually was
airport.
some guy named DB Cooper in the
Yeah, he
area
got
that like
arrested.
they tried
Yeah,
to
and
arrest.
he
Yeah.
kind of fit the profile. Like he looked at the guy too, but he was never in that area. But yeah, his name was DB Cooper. Yeah, I remember that. Um, and more or less, this was very different. Now you could actually just walk up to a terminal, like buy a ticket and get on a plane.
Yeah.
It's not like now when you're waiting there and you have to go through all the security. It was very,
It was
very
like
different.
$20 to buy the plane ticket. It's
Yeah, you just get
1971.
yeah, you just get on
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
He gave a $20 cash bill and hopped on a plane
and
with a bomb. With a bomb,
supposedly it was a bomb. A
supposedly.
lot of people still don't even think the bomb was real
Yeah.
because they never actually saw the bomb. Well, something said she
Well,
saw
the one
saw
stewardess
wires,
did. Yeah.
but yeah, but he just gives a note to the stewardess saying, "I have a bomb, and if you don't want me to blow up this plane, you're going to bring me $200,000, which would have been about like $1.2 million today."
Hmm.
And he gets on this plane,
Well,
and
he said I want $200. So they're already in the
yes,
air, and he's like, "All right." Well, first of all, he hands her this like business card because he sits towards the back, and at first she's like, "Yeah, this guy's hitting on me," and she puts this business card into her purse or whatever it
yeah, she
was,
doesn't look at it later on. Yeah,
and then he's like, "You might want to look at that lady." So then she takes it out again, and that's where it said like $200, and he wants 4 parachutes two primary, and two reserves, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon arrival.
Hmm.
And we don't actually know exactly how it was said because
He took it
he
back.
then took that note back
He
from
took
her.
it back.
Yep,
Yeah.
to not leave any evidence. So yeah, so they're in the air, and this is what he wants, and
And he gets
they
it.
do wind up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets it. They wind up landing in
What they do
Seattle.
first is something that they do. Sorry to cut you off here, but this was
Yeah,
something
go
that they.
ahead. Go.
It's the same thing when we talked about the Limburg baby case. They write down the serial numbers. It's unmarked bills, but they write down the serial number on each and every bill, so they know if it's ever spent, they'll be able to try to
Mhm.
trace it. So that's just something that we'll get back to as we talk about this.
Yeah.
So go
So
ahead. Sorry.
yeah, they give him like 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, essentially, as you mentioned, right? And and they also they photograph him, microfilm photographs of each of them, so they kind of know the serial numbers. That's how they did it. So, needless to say, he gets the money. Everything's brought on board.
He lets the
Well,
plane
he lets all the
lands.
people
He
go.
lets all the people go, but the pilot and a couple crew members.
Yes.
And then they take the plane back up, and they believe he probably had some knowledge because he has the plane go to 10,000 feet, slow down
Yeah.
to a certain speed, basically the lowest and the slowest it can go and still stay in the air. And he has them put the flaps up, which will also slow the plane up
Yeah.
and as much as possible. And then he puts on the parachute and he jumps. And they did not know he jumped at first. He
Well,
orders them
because he
all to
used
go
the
into the
air.
cabin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he went in the back, and that's also why they figured he had to have known a lot about just airplanes and stuff, because not only was he very specific to the crew, like, I want you, like you said, fly at this height and everything else, but he picked a Boeing 727 that had like a back air stair opening, like a little staircase would open from the back tail of the plane, and that staircase could only be opened from the back of the plane. It could not be opened at the time from the cockpit. So, like you said, he went in the back. But there's that's where because there's so many conspiracy theories about this, and some things that are so weird because of the parachutes themselves, right?
Yeah.
And that's because he was given four parachutes, and actually one of those parachutes by accident
It
was
was a dummy. It was
was a
fake.
dummy. Yeah,
Yeah.
fake. Yeah. And we say that it was an accident. I think I believe that because by asking for four, he made it sound as if he was going to take some hostages. You know what I mean? So,
That's what they
like,
were worried about. Yeah, forcing other people
so
out of the plane with them.
exactly, which is why they wouldn't mess with it on purpose. That's why that was his way of ensuring that he would get four good ones. But he picks the oldest parachute out of the four, and then he takes the dummy as his reserve parachute. And many of the people now, and even then, when again, still cold case, we have no idea who this guy is. They're kind of surprised, like, why would he take, if he knows what he's doing, right? A dummy parachute that's not a real parachute, and the oldest one of the bunch, which is a little odd. But yeah, so he jumps out, and that's kind of where the investigation and the cold case really starts for us, I guess.
Well, he
So what do
jumps
you
out
got?
of the plane, and most FBI people believe that he never survived the jump. It was too high of a
Mhm.
jump. He would have to be experienced to be able to do that. And what they also say is the only way he could have survived if he landed on the ground, like if he landed in the trees and then in the ground. If he landed in the water, it was a cold night. It's Washington State. He would have frozen to death. Like there's no way. If he lands in the water, he's dead.
Yeah, they said it was. I mean, it was January, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was January. It was free cold. It was raining, so it wasn't the ideal. It was like a storm too. It wasn't ideal to be jumping out of a plane.
Yeah.
But if he landed anywhere in the water, even like a swampy area or whatever, he's dead. There's no way he survives that because he wasn't wearing. He was wearing a suit and tie. He wasn't wearing like warm weather clothing to survive. But jumping out of the plane, high altitude, they said he probably would have got stuck in a tree or something of that
Hmm.
nature and probably died that way. They don't think he actually survives the jump.
Yeah.
And that's right.
So
There's a massive manhunt, but they don't find him for
they don't
years.
find him.
There's not even
No.
any clues about him for years.
I mean, a lot of people start calling in, just like with the Black Dahlia, like,
Yeah,
"Hey, I'm DB Cooper," or "My uncle's DB Cooper," and also because a lot of newspapers are like giving a reward money, like if
yeah.
you know anything. But they never find him. But then things start kind of popping up, right?
It really
So
heats up in 1980, February of
yeah.
1980. A young boy is digging. He's just like playing around in the mud by the Columbia River, and
Hmm.
he finds a bunch of these bills. Not all of them, but he finds a couple $1,000s worth of
Yeah.
these rotted. bills, and he brings them out to his mom. His mom calls the police. The police come, and because you just find random money, you're supposed to report it to the police, just in case that
Yeah.
happens for any of you out there.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they kind of trace it. Like, oh my God, this was the money that was given to DB Cooper.
Yep.
So again,
And it
this is
was, I mean,
evidence
it's
that
already, and they're like kind of, obviously the money's decomposing and all that stuff. And
yeah,
I don't know if
it's
that's the right
rotted, it's
word.
brown. Yeah,
It's rotted. But they do, you're right. They do say that it's him, which kind of at least puts him in that vicinity where they thought he would have jumped out. They're like, all right, it's not exactly where we thought he jumped out, but it's near where we thought he might have jumped out.
it's in that
But
range of where the parachute could have taken him.
yes, but then
But
they're like, well,
it
why was
wasn't,
it
it wasn't all
buried?
the money. Yeah, yeah. Why was it buried too?
Right, that was a big one. Right, and then some people thought that because of when they dug it out and the boy dug it out, the investigators speculated that it was like a 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens that might have obliterated any other remaining clues, and maybe there was more money or more things that were near there that were just simply destroyed.
Destroyed,
But
washed away
yeah,
forever. Yeah.
yeah, and they never found any more money. That was pretty much it.
Yeah. The only
But
other thing they
what's
did, go ahead.
yeah, go no, you go first.
Well, the other thing I want to talk about that in 2007, the case gets a lot of publicity again because they're able to find some partial DNA. Suppose
Mm-hmm.
that's what they say at first from samples found
Hi or something.
on his tie.
Yep.
They did find samples on his tie in 2001. They've done three organic samples, although they couldn't prove it was him or from someone else who touched it over the years. So it was really impossible. What they do find on it was makes it really interesting. What a lot of people have jumped on is we found out these like metals, and one of the metals is like an titanium alloy. And they said that in the 1970s, you don't really see things using of that. If this was 2010, it could be from a bunch of different things, a bunch of different electronics. In 1970s, not so much, especially this type, with the other things that were kind of combined in it. And the only ones that was using that largely in the 1970s was Boeing was working on our supersonic transport development. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
supersonic jets, basically. And so they're really thinking that Cooper must have been a Boeing employee, that he must have worked for the company some way, somehow. That's how he had to have these pieces of titanium, like shards on his tie. So he had to come in contact with this. It does make sense. He would have a bit more knowledge about the airplanes, a bit more knowledge about how things work. So it's just adds to that theory that he just was someone that knew the company that worked for Boeing.
Yep. So let's look at some of these suspects, right? Again, between 1971 and 2016, right? It was over 1,000 serious suspects. And again, they still have not. I think the case is closed now. I think they
Yeah, they
closed
actually
it.
the FBI closed the case. So like, we're not going to find this guy. If he did survive, he's dead now.
Yep.
So that's it. It is a closed case. Obviously, if they get any new information, they can open it, but they're not actively pursuing DB Cooper anymore.
Yep. 2016, I think they stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few suspects, right? The first one, I think in 2003, remember there was the Kenneth Christensen or I think Christensen, that was the
Yeah,
name, where a guy, Lyle Christensen, who was watching a documentary actually on Cooper, and he's like, well, I think this might have been my brother. Um, and his brother, obviously he passed away years before that. I think in 1994 his brother died, but he goes, I think it was my brother that was DB Cooper. And they started investigating, and they realized that his brother, Kenneth, was enlisted in U.S. Army in 1944. He was trained as a paratrooper. He made a bunch of jumps as a paratrooper. He smoked, which the hijacker did as well. He loved bourbon, which is what Cooper ordered while he got on a plane. He was left-handed, which evidence photos of Cooper's black tie, right, show the tie clip applied on the left side, suggesting that Cooper was also left-handed. And also, like the photos kind of fit more or less. Photos of Christensen kind of fit the hijacker's appearance. And then there's the whole idea of, well, he also purchased a house out of nowhere shortly after, like 1971, and people are like, "Where'd you get the money for that?" Then, when he was dying of cancer in '94, he told his brother, "Like, there's something you should know, but I just cannot tell you." And he
yeah,
said
that
that
was a big
before he
one. Yeah.
passed away. And then they discovered that he had all these like gold coins and valuable stamp collections hidden. Then he had over $200,000 in bank accounts, and people are like, "All right, like this is kind of maybe this really was the guy." Obviously, when they started investigating it, there's doubt, which is why it's still a cold case. And essentially, what they said is that the Christensen guy did not pay for his house in cash in 71. He actually had a 17 year old mortgage. And also, he sold a bunch of his land, they said, in the mid 90s before his death, which is how he accumulated all that money. So, FBI says that he technically is not the prime suspect.
The prime suspect. Yeah.
Yep. Who else? Do you have anybody else?
Well, there was a bunch of other people. I mean, we can go on and on the people, but I just want to talk about a little bit with Cooper is the fact that he's become such this like popular culture phenomenon. A lot of the movies, I know, the show Prison Break. Have you watched that show?
Yep. Yep.
Like they actually, in one of the guys in the show says he's DB Cooper. They actually reveal him as DB Cooper in the show, that he was DB Cooper at one point. The
Yep.
Blacklist talks about him. There was that movie with who's that guy? I forgot his name. He's married to I can't remember her name now either. I was thinking the
No,
place
that's right.
Drax or whatever. I think his name's like Drax, Dax, something like that. Not Drax. That's the Guardians of the Galaxy guy. But that movie Without a Paddle talks about him.
Yeah.
They're looking for it. They've
I
done
actually saw that
episodes
movie.
of remember that show Drunk History.
Yep.
There's one on that. Like he's become a pop culture phenomenon, and a lot of the people who write these books about DB Cooper, they all say he survived. They love the fact they think he survived. He took his money, whatever he was able. Like some of it fell out. That's what the ones that kid found, and he just went to like Mexico or some tropical island. He's just chilling. And they like the fact that this guy, hijacked this plane. He didn't hurt anybody, so that's why he kind of gets glorified. If he would have killed
Yep.
anybody, it would have been much different. But he lets everybody go. He just takes his money, and he had a plan. He was dedicated to his plan. That's what they say, and he jumps out of the plane and he just lives a happy life after that. And there were copycats, people who try
Yes.
to do the same thing, but they wind up getting caught. It's not exactly as easy as Cooper made it seem, basically.
Yeah. I mean, one of the more famous ones was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.
Yeah, Martin McNally was another one.
Yep. Um, McCoy actually, they said he staged the most known because he was successful until he was caught. Right,
Yeah,
boarded a United Airlines flight in 1972, so a year afterwards. He picked the same kind of Boeing with the
it
stairs
was
in the
a total
back,
copycat. Yeah, I think
complete copycat, and it was
he did.
Denver,
I'm going to do it.
Colorado. And then he did the same. Literally everything's the same. He had basically what resembled to be a hand grenade, unloaded handgun, so on and so forth. He demanded $500. He got the $500. Everything is exactly the same. And then he jumps out and parachutes out. And then he except he gets caught. Right. He left behind handwritten hijacking instructions, and his fingerprints were all over it. So that's where he messed up,
He gets
and
caught. Yeah.
they got him like 2 days later, and
That's
he
all
had
they
all the
say.
money with him.
That's why they really believe that Cooper didn't survive. They're like, there's no way he would have been able to gather. They were searching that whole area. It's all wooded area, so he would have had, or they say he had to have someone helping him, someone waiting
Yes,
for him somewhere there that could get him out of there, and then wait for it, also help him to hide the money because there was federal agents all in that area looking for anyone in the woods, and they never find anything until that kid finds the money in 1980.
yep,
So I
absolutely.
don't know. What do you think about that, Pete? You think that this guy? You think DB Cooper survived, or what?
Eh,
It
It's
was
very
15
unlikely.
degrees, 15 degrees,
Yeah, it's
and
very
10,000 feet.
unlikely. I
I
don't
mean, it
know,
was like
very
wind chill
unlikely.
too, like massive wind chill. So
I'm sure my students gonna have a bone to pick with me on this one. There's gonna be a discussion in class. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I can't tell. What do you think? You think he survived? I don't think so.
unless he had help, I don't think he survived.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things they said. Maybe he did have help. That
Yeah,
was,
I mean,
and again, there's so much more
it's so much more.
complexity
Like
to
if he
this.
had help, that kind of changes some of the story. But then again, how's that guy know he's gonna land where he lands?
Yeah.
So who
But
knows?
then they said someone saw a guy hitchhiking. I mean, again, there's
Yeah,
so many
yeah, hitchhiking.
multitude,
That could have been
yeah,
him, but
of options
because I
that
know
could
one
have
story
happened.
with he hid like winter clothing in the woods, but there's no way to jump out of a plane and land exactly in the middle of the night and land,
Yeah.
especially in the set, and land exactly where you hid a bunch of clothes. Like that's really stretching it. I think the bounds of reality. But I never jumped out
So
of a plane, so who knows?
yeah, I know, right? I know. So let's kind of talk about the ones that we kind of went on our own, run rogue a little bit.
No, you go
So
first. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I couldn't pick. I really couldn't. But I mean, there's a few cold cases that I think that would be relevant to today. The first one is kind of felt you. We don't know it when we do it, but I don't know about you, but I get really annoyed when I try to open like a medicine bottle that has like the
This is the one you.
tamper resistant packaging. Yeah, the Tylenol. murders. It just of 1982. That was one of my things that I kind of picked out because it
Well,
was
which one
never
did you pick
solved.
out? Did you pick that one or a different one?
I picked that one. I did.
Well,
I mean, I
that's
picked
what I
another
picked
one.
too, so now we're screwed.
Yeah. Well, no, I picked another one. I picked another one as well, so we're good.
Okay.
But so let's. Oh, perfect. Let's do this, right? So Tylenol, 1982. I mean, this is super freaky.
This is the one that I picked out because this is, I'm sure you picked it out too. It's one I always used to tell the students that kind of freaked me out the most.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all freaky, but when you hear this one, this changed American culture, well, more
Yeah.
than American consumerism.
Yeah.
It's the reason it's what it is today. The reason you have those hard times with those tops
Yeah. So like, if you
is
talk about it,
because
think
of
about it.
this. This is the reason
Yes.
why.
Yeah. So right now, if you get like, Advil or Tylenol, there is a seal of plastic
I think
wrap
that's
that's
also what they
really,
call
really
it.
on there.
It's also
Then
what
you get that off, which is hard to take apart. You're right. Then once you get that off, you have to do that whole like squeeze and pop up
Mhm.
cap, right? Then once you do that, then you have the foil that is literally designed not to be able to tear neatly.
To be
And
tampered.
then when you finally get that, you have that whole wisp of cotton in there, and you're like, "Geez, I'm just
And even
trying to get
but it's also the
some
Tylenol
Advil."
itself, because now they're called
Yeah,
caplets, which is they're solid. What they used to be,
yeah,
when this killing was taking
capsule.
place,
Yeah,
like,
they're the
they were
capsules.
capsules. You could actually pull them apart, and
Yeah,
that's what they would do. Sometimes you still see, I guess, if you get medication from a pharmacy, I guess they're still like that. You can actually pull them apart and dump the powder, the medicine, whatever it is, out. And that's what this individual was doing. He was going to the stores.
yeah. I was gonna say yeah. So what happened? Go ahead.
He was going to these stores in the Chicago area in 1982, and he's taking the Tylenol capsules out of off the shelves. He's opening them up. He's taking some of the pills out, and he's emptying out the Tylenol, and he's filling them back up with cyanide, and he's putting them back on the shelf.
Yes,
People are coming. People
in
are
random
buying.
places. So
Random places all
they
over the
weren't
place.
able to figure out if it
Yeah,
was one batch. No, he's just randomly buying
yeah,
things and putting them back on the shelf.
yeah. And a lot of people thought maybe this was like a manufacturing error. But they figure out pretty soon that it's not someone probably working the factories. Actually, it's someone actually doing this in like the stores. And
Hmm.
it was like a huge thing because what happened was these people are dying and they don't know why they're dying because they're not checking for cyanide. And then actually some firefighters were like, you know what, they go to this one place where this young girl died, and the parents were like, "Oh, she was complaining of a headache. I gave her a Tylenol, went to bed, and she was. I woke up the next morning, and she wasn't up. She passed away." And they kind of figured out that the only thing they all had in common was that they all took extra strength
Tylenol.
Tylenol at some point within. This was from like March, April of 1980, 1982.
Two. Yeah, this is the year we were born.
Yeah,
Nuts.
and so what's going on is they put it all together, and they take this. They take the Tylenol from these people's houses, and they have no connection to each other whatsoever, other than the fact they live in Chicago.
Yes.
And then some are 31 years old, 35 years old, 19, 27.
Hmm.
Some are younger than that. And they find these capsules and they test the capsules, and some of them have cyanide in it. So that's when and then the news gets out, and Johnson is freaking out because they know this is going to destroy their company. Plus, they don't want people to die either.
Of
So they
course.
start actually warning people. They actually say, "Do not use our products. If you have our product, throw it out." They're telling people to do this, and they're
Yeah.
halting production on it because they
They said
don't
they
want.
lost like 265 million
Yeah, because it's
off the
worried
bat.
about the poisoning risk of this. Yeah,
But they also said that technically Johnson and Johnson got a lot of credibility from this because of the way they handled it. Didn't try to defend it. They were very open with the public, and they're like, "No, throw our stuff out, and it will replace it as well." So
yeah. They
not
say,
only did
yeah,
they
yeah,
lose,
we'll replace it for free when we come up with something
yeah,
different.
I mean, like you said, they went from capsules to having solid pills. And there was ongoing investigations with regards to this. Again, the person was never found, and just like with the other ones, there's copycats.
The other
But I
people,
mean, there's some suspects. There's one guy, James William Lewis. I
yeah,
don't know if you
I saw that
heard
one.
of
The
this guy.
main thing with him was, yeah, he sent a letter to Johnson saying, "I'll stop killing people
If you give me
if you
$1
give me
million,
$1 million." And
yeah,
they were able to. He left fingerprints. I don't know why.
fingerprints.
Like, if you mail something,
I know,
you
I
know,
know, I
like
get
wear gloves. I mean, I guess I'm telling people how to get away with crime, but like I don't think that's not isn't that like common? Like if you're going to do
You
something
would
and like
think,
you don't want
like,
to get
have like
caught, like
haven't like,
it's common sense. But then again, people who are doing this aren't in their right minds anyway.
yeah,
So they're not going to think of like wearing gloves or something like that. And I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense how they think they're not going to get caught if you do something like that. But
yeah.
the guy probably put his own return address on there too.
like, I mean, he was convicted, right? He convicted him of extortion.
Yeah.
He later winds up serving 13 years sentence in prison. He gets paroled in 1995. But there's a lot of court documents that were released later on, like 2009, 2010, that they're saying that the Department of Justice investigators actually concluded that it was him
Yeah, he did do
that
it.
was
They
responsible
just
for
didn't
this
have any
poisoning.
evidence to charge him.
They just didn't have enough evidence to charge him. So again, it's considered a cold case, but
Well, yeah, they concluded that, but the issue was him and his wife did submit DNA samples later on and fingerprints, and it doesn't match some of the other ones that they have. So
ooh,
he always said the FBI plays fair. I have nothing to worry about. So there's a lot of other people. There's another one. Roger Arnold was identified.
mhm.
He was eventually cleared of the killings, but because he had so much media attention, he actually had a mental breakdown, nervous breakdown. Because people like the news kept saying, "Hey, are you this Tylenol killer? Are you this? Are you that?" Um, so he actually like blamed it on a bar owner, Marty
Yeah.
Sinclair, in the summer of 1863, and then Arnold shot and killed him. Like they just killed each other. Well, yeah, Arnold shot and killed him.
At one point, remember the FBI actually requested DNA samples from the Unabomber?
Yeah, he was on there, but then they concluded he had nothing to do with it. The new thing
Yeah.
about the Unabomber, that can be another podcast, right? Ted Kaczynski is
Yeah.
he admitted to stuff. Like if you thought they thought he might have been the Zodiac killer too. They asked him that. He's like, nah.
Yeah.
He's like, I tell you, because he was just so out there. He was
Yeah.
more against the government than anything else. But he had a bunch of people, and actually there was other deaths again later on in the late '80s also.
Yeah, copycats started it again, right?
In '86, and that's like, oh, what's going on here? And that's when they changed from the caplets, the capsules to the caplets that
Capsule.
they have today, which
Yeah.
are tamper proof.
Yeah.
Um, they're just like a solid, more or less.
Yeah, the ones in the late '80s was in the New York City area, and it was Excedrin actually also in Washington State. This is so scary that you could just go. Well, I guess you really can't this day and age. I guess that's the whole
Yeah, but
point,
just
right?
imagine then, like you taking a medicine and trying to make yourself feel better in some way, and you don't even think about it. Think of how many like Tylenol is. You don't even call it aspirin; you call it Tylenol. You know, I need to take a
Yeah,
Tylenol. I need to take that. You have a headache, you have body aches or something like that. You take one of these little painkillers, and you're killing yourself because you're taking cyanide. And
yeah,
once you swallow it, that's it. There's nothing. That's it. And think about the
yeah,
parents who gave that to their kid, their child. You know, because they had a headache.
yeah.
It's
Freaking,
a
it's
sad because if
insane.
this individual decides to do this, and what type of individual does it, you have to be sick in the head, obviously. And I always wonder too, like how no one saw it. Like no one saw someone sitting there. I guess you can be quick with it, but how quick can you really be? Emptying out capsules and putting cyanide in it. That's just.
Nuts.
But that's what always freaked me out because it's one of those things. It's a silent killer, you know.
Yeah.
Those silent killers that just kind of sneak up out of nowhere. Those are just because you never know who can have it. It's just so random. Like everyone who died, it was just random. There's no connection. There's no real reason. It happened by them simply taking a Tylenol.
So I had one other one that I was kind of I was torn again. You and I both obviously have little kids, but and I never really thought of this, even though I've gotten so many Amber alerts. Amber Hagerman.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
that's a tough case.
that's a tough case, yeah.
It's a really tough
But for
case.
those of us that ever get, the Amber Alert on your phone, just so you know that the Amber Alert system is named in her honor.
Yeah.
Amber Hagerman, January 13th, 1996. She was 9 years old, and her little brother, who was 5, they're riding their bikes down the street from the grandparents. They rode literally 2 blocks down.
An empty parking lot, just riding
Yes.
the bike.
Yeah, they were in an empty parking lot, and the 5-year-old's like, well, I want to go back home. So he came back home, and his parents and the grandparents were like, where's your sister? Go get your sister. And he's like, oh, she wanted to stick around. Like, no, go get her. So then he rode his bike back and realized she wasn't there, but the bike was there.
Yeah.
So he quickly rode back and said, she's not there, but her bike's there. So the parents freaked out and they jumped in a car and they drove there. And when the time they got there, there was already a police officer there. And they're like, oh, this isn't good. And
Because
apparently a neighbor
there was an old
saw,
man. He
yep,
was like in his 80s, right? Late
yep,
70s, early 80s, and he just saw a guy at what was it, a black pickup truck? I mean,
yep,
my memory, a black pickup truck forcing her in the car, like she was yelling,
yep,
saying let me go," and this guy forcing the car. And he was the only witness from the crime, and he's like, "Listen, I didn't really get a good look.
yeah.
He was old man, bad eyes, but he heard it because the screams were so loud." Saw what was going on, so he identifies the best as he can. And then a few days later, unfortunately, they find Amber's body
Yeah,
in a
4 days
ditch.
later.
In a
Yeah.
ditch. And
And
it wasn't the reason. I'm sorry to cut you off there, Pete.
yeah,
But
go.
one reason why it becomes an Amber Alert is because they didn't really block things off. They looked for her, but they didn't like do like a wide search. They didn't close down the streets. They didn't have
Yeah,
other people looking. They didn't broadcast it. The idea is today when they have these Amber Alerts is that they can get the picture out. They can have local law enforcement be aware of it because a lot of them weren't aware of it if they weren't right there. And the idea is then it can kind of form like a noose, lack of a better term, around that area and make it smaller and smaller before the guy gets out. Like if they didn't say, "Hey, look," they didn't put out a police report or a watch to say, "Let's look out for this black Jeep," black
yeah,
pickup truck. If they otherwise, what they would be stopping every black pickup truck. Like that's it. That's probable cause. They're going to stop every black pickup truck, and maybe they would have found her still alive. That's the idea.
yeah,
Because they think that she was alive for a while before he killed her, based on the autopsy reports.
yeah.
She wasn't.
Also, again, it became a cold case. I mean, the one thing that they're positive about is that she was abducted and killed by a stranger. I mean, that was ultimately what they came up with that much. But there's some statistic that said actually it's less common than you think, just being abducted by a stranger. Between 2010 and 2019, fewer than 350 people under the age of 21 were abducted by strangers. And obviously, that's still a lot of abductions, but hundreds of thousands of kids go missing each year, right? And
Yeah.
in more than 90%, 95% of those cases, the missing child ran away or it's somebody that's not a stranger that's involved.
The family members. A lot of times it's the
Father, mother,
father or
whatever.
mother who doesn't have custody
Yeah.
comes in and takes a child. That's most of what you see with the Amber Alerts today. But you still have these other ones.
Oh, it's
They really
nuts.
have very few suspects. There's one suspect I can't remember. He does have a black pickup truck. I forget what else, but he also works in a junkyard. And the big thing with him was that he was being suspected of it, and the cops were coming. They caught him burning clothes in a fire when they came in to like interrogate him.
Yeah.
But they got there too late, so they wasn't sure. But he's like, "Oh no, these are just clothes I found. I was just decided to, they were in a briefcase with a bunch of other clothes that someone dumped, and I was just burning them because I wanted to keep the briefcase or whatever, like the suitcase." He did have some child molestation charges, so he definitely fits that profile. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry.
We need to
So
start doing some happy ones, man.
yeah, well, you're
Like,
the one that picked this one. I picked the Tylenol,
oh,
and that's not
man.
happy either. But
Well, I was gonna say the one people.
well,
It's
yeah,
nuts.
but you can't get that now. Like now, you're going to be okay from
Yeah,
Tylenol.
true. And so out of those two terrible events, obviously you have two positive things come out of
Positive things,
them.
and it's
That
also things that now everyone is aware of an Amber Alert. You just know
yes,
what it is. Yeah, your phone. Think about it. I remember sometimes it happening in class, or every kid's phone is going off at the same time.
yeah,
You get the Amber Alerts. You see them when you're driving on the highway. They have them on those digital boards. The Amber
yeah,
Alerts. Look for this car. Look for that car. Things of that nature. And same thing with the Tylenol. Now that's totally changed. Where you have the child proof. It's more to. It's really you think it's child proof. That's not really what it's there for. It's to make sure no one tampers. It's not child proof. It's tamper proof. And that's what
yes,
they say. If this seal is broken, get rid of it. I'm going back to that one a little bit.
yeah,
With the Ember case, is definitely one of those ones that unfortunately will probably never be. It's never going to be solved.
yeah,
It's just not. There's no not enough evidence. There's no way they're going to be able to put anyone, even if someone comes forward and says it. But you have that too. You have that with every case. You have individuals saying, "Oh, I'm the one that did it." I'm the one because they just want that publicity. But like you have with John Benet Ramsey, that's another one we can do. Actually, I don't want to do that one anytime soon. But
yeah. No, and that's another thing. I kind of just didn't want to go there. And we definitely have to pick a happier podcast. We should talk about like Hershey or something.
chocolate.
we
Well,
got
we did cereal.
we did cereal, right? I
It's
know. Maybe we should do the chocolate. We'll ponder. We'll ponder. Usually, what happens is we change our mind 10 times by the time we record this every week. So
usually.
okay. So a few things before we get going. One, just in case you guys have not yet been following us on Twitter and or Facebook, you could always visit us on our website, which is historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you guys next week.
Take it easy.
Enjoy.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take it easy. I hope hope everyone enjoyed our podcast. And if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.